Hey guys, Michael from Copper vs Glass. Now I actually enjoy playing mobile games, whether it's on a tablet or on a phone. I like the experience and I also like the gameplay. I'm not a huge fan of the virtual controls, but the fact that I've played the game so often, I've actually got quite used to it, and not to brag, I think I'm actually okay at playing some mobile games. But some people out there aren't necessarily a fan, and that's a shame because there are some great titles out there like Modern Combat 5, Real Racing 3, just to name a few. Barry from Copper vs Glass, he's actually not a fan of mobile gaming whatsoever, so this video is kind of for him and also anybody else that isn't a fan of using their device for playing these great games. You're getting some really nice processors and also some graphics performance in newer devices, and it's worth checking out some of these awesome games. But the issue is on-screen controls. So today I'm going to be changing that by taking a look at a controller from Moga. Now Moga make a lot of controllers available for mobile devices, so let's take a look. Now the only thing that you really need to have this working is either a tablet or a phone. Now I'm going to be working with the Moga Pocket, which is the cheapest one that they offer, and I actually picked it up for around $12.99 here in the UK, as I just wanted to kind of dip my toe into the mobile gaming experience by using a Bluetooth controller to see if it actually does improve the gaming performance. Now in terms of what you get inside the packaging itself, you do get a Moga pack where you can actually put the controller to actually keep it safe, and it kind of attaches with magnets at the top, so that's definitely handy if you do want to just chuck it in a bag or you are going traveling with the controller itself. You're also going to be getting a quick guide of how to actually use the controller itself, and just to make you guys aware, you are going to need batteries which aren't included in the packet. You're also going to get a free game which is Sonic CD, and there is a code here. I'm not necessarily a fan of the game itself, but if you do want to download it, then the first person has that code just there. There's also some warranty information and also a quick start guide, but the setup and also the use of the controller is very simple to do, and the only thing that you really need is the Moga Pivot application, which is available in the App Store and also the Play Store on Android. Now as I've mentioned, I got this controller mainly because of the price of $12.99, but Moga controllers do vary in price by quite a lot and also in build quality. They go from the really cheap ones, as you can see this one here, all the way up to ones for about $79.99, of which at that time and that price you're going to be getting basically an Xbox One controller in terms of the build quality, and just in general the buttons and things do feel a lot nicer. Now on the one that I've got here, you can see that it does have an Xbox 360 layout with the analog controllers diagonally across, and you've also got the D-pad. Now the analogs themselves do feel very much like what the PS Vita did feel like on the first Vita, so not necessarily great in terms of travel, and you'd also have the D-pad for the Y, B, X and A buttons, and then all you do is put up this top bit here, which is where your actual phone goes. Now it does accommodate phones up to a very large size. I'd maybe say Galaxy Note would be the largest you could go. In terms of something like the new Nexus 6, I'm not sure if it will actually fit. You've also got the on-off button down the bottom there, and if you turn the device round to the back, you've also got the left and right triggers, which are great for if you're playing some first-person shooting games or also some racing games for accelerate and brake. Now it does have a really nice rubber texture on the back, which is really good for grip, and it also doesn't actually pick up much in terms of fingerprints, which is definitely nice. On the sides here is where you find the batteries, as it is battery powered. There's no internal battery that charges via micro USB, and just be warned that you don't get batteries in the packaging itself. But overall the design is quite nice. There are a lot of glossy plastic sections on this particular controller, so it will pick up quite a lot of fingerprints on the sides and also on this middle portion here. But as I mentioned, if you go up to the more expensive controllers, the build quality is a lot nicer, and it does prevent things like fingerprints and things like that, and just in general they do feel a lot more sturdy. So what I'm going to do now is just go over how the actual controller works with a phone. I'm going to be using the Nexus 5, and all you do is place it into the top, stretch it out, and then you're pretty much done. It's got a really nice tight fit, and there's also some rubber on the top and the bottom to make sure that the device itself doesn't move around too much or fall out of the controller. Now as I've mentioned before, the more expensive ones do have slightly different clamps, but overall it does the job that it needs to. Now what you need to do is get the Moga Pivot application, and then all you need to really do is just follow the very simple on-screen guide to setting up the controller. So all you need to do is turn it on, and then what you need to do is just go on to the next screen, and it's going to then start to look for the actual controller itself. Now I'm going to speed this portion of the video up as it can take a minute or two to actually find the controller itself, but once you're done it's going to take you into the library of the Moga controller and also give you the option to download a free game straight away. Now don't be fooled by what the library shows you. There are hundreds of titles that work with Bluetooth controllers that aren't in this particular Moga library, so don't think that when you're looking through the library of games available that this is all you can see, because there are a lot more available that aren't actually showing in this store. Now one thing that I would say is the controller itself is very light, and as you can see I'm holding it down with each hand at the moment, because if I do let go it will wobble around, and it has a very low center of gravity, meaning it will just fall over if touched very lightly, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. And again, the more expensive controllers will not be doing this. Now what we're going to be doing is having a look at Asphalt 8 on the Nexus 5 and then moving on to the Nexus 7 for something a bit more intense with Modern Combat 4. Once in the game, you've actually got a couple of options for the controls. Now in terms of navigating around the menus, I find it most easy just actually using the touchscreen on the phone itself. Now some games that are specifically designed for the controller have very easy menus to navigate, but I just find it easier to use the in-game menus as you would normally, and then just use the controller for the actual gameplay itself. So I'm just going to load up a quick game here of Asphalt 8, which is a really great example for this controller. Now you've got the triggers on the back for accelerate and also decelerate, and also the drifting mechanic, and you can also do things like nitros and things with the D-pad in the top right hand corner. Now Asphalt 8 is a very quick and very intense racing game, so the controls do really need to be quite sharp, and that's one thing that I love about this controller. If I move the analog stick from left to right, you can see here that it picks up my movements pretty much instantly and doesn't really detract from the gameplay whatsoever. Now with the Nexus 5 the screen itself isn't huge, and it's great to get your thumbs off of the screen and to be able to enjoy the game for what it is and see the visuals, and the gameplay itself is really nice. Now one thing that I would say is in terms of battery life, you do need to kind of keep an eye out, as obviously you do have your screen on your mobile device, Bluetooth has to be turned on, and if you've got the speakers on as well, you're definitely going to want to keep a charger handy just to be on the safe side. Now in terms of the controller itself, it's pretty much only putting out a Bluetooth signal, so the batteries themselves, you won't really need to charge them that often, but unfortunately there's no indicator to say when the batteries are running low. So that's definitely something you're going to have to keep an eye on. If the control doesn't work for any reason, it may just be that you need to change the batteries. Now in terms of the gameplay for Asphalt 8, you can see here that it's really easy, and it does kind of give you that console experience. If you've got something like a Chromecast, you can just cast the game onto your TV and use the Bluetooth controller to kind of get that living room experience. You can pass the controller around for your friends to play the next go, etc. And just in general, it's a really nice experience and something that you don't usually get with mobile gaming. You can see here that, like I've mentioned, the controls are very responsive as I'm drifting around this corner here. You can see here that I've got no issues at all with moving around. The controller is great for a racing game like Asphalt 8, but one thing that I would say is the analog controls are very mushy. Like I've mentioned, they're kind of like the original PlayStation Vita if you've ever used that, and there's not really much travel, and just in general the feedback isn't necessarily the best thing in the world, which isn't really a problem for a racing game. If you're playing something more intense like a first person shooter, then you may actually struggle in some instances, and that's what we're going to look at now. So Asphalt 8 on the whole runs great on a Bluetooth controller, but now we're going to move on to Modern Combat 4, which is a modern day shooter for the mobile platform. Now I'm going to be playing Modern Combat 4 on the Nexus 7 with the controller in the clamshell design with the hinge down. So this gives a totally different experience to actually playing it with a phone attached, as you get a lot more freedom to have the controller on your lap, and you don't have to be as close to the actual device itself. Now keep in mind that it is Bluetooth, so you can't go really far away, but in general it's a really nice experience having this kind of split screen mode where you've got the screen quite far away and the controller a bit closer up to you, and it kind of gets out the way a lot more than it does with the phone. Now again, Modern Combat, again, you don't want to have all your fingers and things on screen, and again you can see how responsive the game is. Now one thing that I would say is there seems to be a tiny bit more lag with Modern Combat, and I've had some issues with the screen as well, where as you can see there, I need to do a movement on screen and for some reason it hasn't picked it up. Now whether that's because it's getting a bit confused with the Moga controller and also the on-screen as well, and I haven't found a way to do any of these on-screen actions on the actual controller itself. Now after a while I did get it to work, so on this run here you'll see that I got the animation to work fine, and then we can get into the actual game itself. Now there is a little bit of lag, as I've mentioned, in Modern Combat 4. Now what that means is when you move the analog stick, the player moves ever so slightly after what you've pressed. And the fact that there isn't much movement with the analog controls themselves means that it's a very twitchy shooter, and not in the good sense like Call of Duty, in the bad sense where you really have to struggle to line up your shooting. Now it does have auto aim in the actual game itself, which definitely does help quite a lot, but if you're playing things like an online game of Modern Combat 4, you may struggle a bit more using the controller than you would the on-screen navigation buttons. But overall it's definitely a great experience, and like I mentioned, it gets your hands away from the device at the end of the day, and that's definitely not a bad thing. Now you may be asking yourself why I'm not playing Modern Combat 5 as it is the newer game in the series. Well, the simple reason is it's not compatible with the game controller. I don't see why not, and it may get compatibility in a future update, but as it stands now in 2014 you can't play Modern Combat 5 with a Bluetooth controller. Now the on-screen controls in Modern Combat 5 have got a lot better than what we've seen previously, but it would have been great to have the really nice visuals along with the actual controller itself to get a really immersive game experience. Now, Modern Combat 4 on the other hand does still look good for its time, and the added capability to use the Bluetooth controller is definitely a nice feature to have. Now I did actually play this one on my screen using the Chromecast, so I was able to play it on a TV, and it did look really nice. There is a little bit of lag, but that's not necessarily the controller's fault, it's more to do with the actual Chromecast itself. But overall guys, I would definitely recommend trying a Bluetooth controller. Now if you are looking for a controller, I'd maybe go for one of the cheaper models, just see if it is something that you are going to use on a regular basis, and I will link down to Moga on Amazon down in the description below. Now all you need is a compatible game, a tablet and a phone of your choice, and I would maybe use a newer device just in general because the games themselves do look really good, and hopefully newer games like Modern Combat 5 will get an update sooner or later to allow us to play these games on our mobile devices with a Bluetooth controller. In the meantime, I'm Michael from Copper vs Glass with a quick look at how to improve your gaming experience on a mobile device, and I will catch you guys in the next video.